Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Diversity Project's first solo International Women's Day event. It's wonderful to have you with us, and obviously you have joined us for the Male Allyship panel. We have an exciting morning, and it's not too late to sign up to the other panels if you wish to, shown on the agenda here. We have a fascinating set of inspiring careers in fund management coming after this one. And then a panel on breaking the bias around menopause in the workplace. But first, if I may, a few words of introduction from me, and particularly around where we are at around gender diversity in the fund management industry. Now, obviously, you know the theme is breaking the bias around International Women's Day globally this year, and it seems a very relevant theme for the investment and savings industry because, frankly, we are somewhat behind, and there has been something of a gridlock around progress towards gender balance in our industry, particularly in the fund management roles. Now, there has been progress. I joined the industry almost 35 years ago, which makes me feel about 100, and workplace culture has definitely improved since then, and by some way. But we're still finding it hard to attract women to join us in the first place, and diverse women at that, and then, of course, to encourage them to stay and fulfill their career potential. And despite very many special initiatives and lots of efforts over the years, we still have this lack of female fund managers in particular. Over the past 2 decades, the proportion of women in fund management roles in the UK has actually fallen from 14% to just 11% today. Now, it's important that we address this, and not just to be nice to women. It's important for results. We know that the best results generally come from gender balanced teams, and that's also been proven or illustrated to be true in fund management roles. Citywire did some research a few years ago which showed that mixed gender teams tend to perform best. Now, the other reason for us to do something about it, but slightly jokingly, is that I always say I'm not going to retire from the investment industry until we have really moved the dial and made big progress towards gender balance. And perhaps it's because there's a desire for me to finally move on. The Diversity Project has come up with a targeted plan, a 3-point plan to really finally address the issues that are preventing us from making further progress. Now, first, we're going to focus on male allyship, and you're obviously going to hear about what that means and what men can do to really champion change in a moment. Second, we are encouraging all our member firms to sign up to GAIN. Girls Are Investors. It's a fabulous program. Again, you're going to have a story from one of their alumni on the panel around inspiring career stories, the one after this. But it's a great initiative, now in its 2nd year, which offers internships to young women, very talented women, and then in the hope that they will get permanent roles. And the success rate to date is around 50%. The information around GAIN will also be included in follow-up material that we'll be sending you. And third, and I'm very excited about this, we are today announcing the launch of a first of its kind Future Female Fund Managers program. Now, this program is designed to complement the existing CFA qualifications and to equip women who have the ambition and aptitude to become fund managers with all the skills and the confidence they need to succeed. It's unusually developed and delivered by the industry for the industry. So we're going to be using mainly practitioners, past and present fund managers, to deliver the training. So just a few words about the program. It is a work in progress. There will be further iterations over coming months before we actually launch the first cohort in January 23. But it will, as I said, equip women with the additional skills besides the technical know-how that they need to succeed as fund managers. It will be both in person and online. One of the critical elements will be that each woman will have a sponsor back at her firm. So this won't be in a vacuum. She will be championed back at the firm. Often it'll be a male champion, although not obviously exclusively. And they will ensure that her opportunities match her growing skill set. And we will be awarding a diploma at the end of 12 sessions. So the sort of thing we'll be addressing digital skills, and not just sort of how to work from home successfully, but the type of technological progress that we're seeing that is essential in terms of being a good fund manager. I won't read through all of this. Again, you'll be able to find out more afterwards. But for example, a lot of women say that they find it very difficult still to navigate through cultural barriers, particularly if they are, as is so often the case, one in a very small minority. We will encourage them to be self-aware, to seek allies, including male allies, and to navigate through life events, give advice around how to ask for a pay rise, how to return to work after a baby, and through the menopause, again, a subject that we're going to discuss later. And we're also going to be talking about paying it forward. One of my great beliefs is that everybody can contribute to this issue. And even if you're very junior, by creating networks, by creating communities, then we can enhance each other's confidence. We are delighted to announce that today at the first announcement, we actually already have 10 of our member firms who are on board, which is fantastic. And you can see the names and the logos of the firms who've signed up here. And some of them are very big employers. So that is an exciting start for the program. This is a bit of an advert. If your company is interested in taking part, please do get in touch, whether you just want to find out a little bit more or whether you want to sign up and be part of the sort of co-creation of the program over coming months. So thank you to everybody who's already on board. And as I said, you'll get a short video which recaps a lot of what I've said. All right, enough from me. So let's move on to the main business of this particular panel, how men can help to break the bias. I'm really looking forward to this panel, not least because it's being moderated by my former colleague, Janine Menescarin, who was my colleague at Legal & General and now is head of proposition at Coutts Bank and is a member of our male allyship work stream at the Diversity Project. She is joined by a panel of wonderful men and women who've given their time this morning. I'm delighted it's a mixed panel. We have 30% men in the audience today, which is fantastic. Janine, over to you.
Thank you, Helena. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. So as Helena said, my name is Janine Menescarin, and I'll be your chair for the first panel of this morning. The topic is male allyship, and I'm joined by the most amazing array of panelists. I will let them briefly introduce themselves in a minute. But what I wanted to do was just outline our goal for the next 40 or so minutes. What we'd like to do is to allow you to come away with 3 tangible things: an understanding of what a male ally is and the impact on that a male ally has on his female colleagues, a few tips on how to be an effective male ally, and what your organization can do to help encourage allyship in the workplace. As Helena mentioned, we have prepared a toolkit which will be circulated to all attendees. Please do share that widely within your organizations and amongst colleagues. It's full of really useful tips and will provide you with a really good summary of the discussion we'll have today. I would also like to make the session as interactive as possible, given the medium. So please, if you've got any questions, send them through either through the chat or the Q&A function on Zoom, and I'll try and get to them as much as possible. Now, before we dive into the introductions, I wanted to spend a few minutes defining male allyship. A lot of people ask me, what does it actually mean? Now, simply put, to achieve gender equity, both men as well as women must advocate for it. It isn't just the role of the women to advocate for gender equity. And let's be clear, male allies are not heroes rescuing women. We're not talking about a knight in shining armors coming on a white horse to rescue us. Allyship is more like a movement. It's about changing norms, challenging assumptions, and advocating for fairer systems. So some of these interventions may be small and some may be bigger, but the mass total of those is what creates that movement that I mentioned earlier. Right, without further ado, because I don't want to eat into the discussion time, let's get started with the panel introductions. Panelists, if I could ask you please to give a brief introduction to yourselves and why this topic is of importance to you. I'm going to start with Tanya because you're the next person to my right.
Okay, thank you, Janine, and good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for inviting me onto the panel. My name's Tanya Allerton. I'm the head of UK advisory distribution at Vanguard Asset Management in the UK. I've been in that position for nearly 10 years now, so I've certainly done my time here. I've got nearly 25 plus years experience in the industry though, and always working in some form of financial services or asset management sales, and often being the only woman in that team or in the room. I've certainly seen allyship in all its guises, and I'm really looking forward to a lively discussion this morning. I live in Yorkshire with my husband and my 2 children.
Thank you, Tanya. John, if I can go to you next.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Jonathan Weyland. I'm a private banker at Julius Baer. I've worked in financial services for incredibly almost 25 years now. The vast majority of that in private banking and in the client-facing private banker role. And I've been part of the Male Allyship group with alongside Janine and a few other colleagues. And you know, having thought I was supportive and probably being quite a good male ally a few years ago, I've certainly learned so much more about it and how much more there is to it than what us men may initially think there is.
Brilliant, thanks, John. Jackie?
Hi, I'm Jackie Boylan. I head up Fidelity's advisor platform, previously known as Funds Network until about a month ago. I'm also for the past 3 years been the global co-sponsor of the Gender Balance Strand. So very passionate about equality, and male allyship obviously forms a really strong part of that.
Thank you, Jackie. Richard?
Hi, I'm Richard. I work at M&G in our advice business. I didn't really get this at all until a couple of years ago. One of my colleagues gave me a book because it was really important to them. I read the book, all about why men win at work, and it absolutely blew my mind. I had no understanding of what I wasn't doing to help deal with inequality and how I was part of the challenge. And that surprised me because I arrogantly thought I knew it and I didn't. And I guess for me, men like me, I'm a white middle class guy. I can't understand what it feels like to be a female in the workplace. So I've had to go and educate myself. And I'm really passionate that I guess it's all of our jobs to do that, to make sure culture changes and we make things more equal and break the bias.
Richard, we've had our first question. What was the book you read?
The book was called Why Men Win at Work by Jill Whitty Collins. I'd recommend it to you. Literally, I read a lot of books and I'm not sure how much value I get from them, but this one fundamentally changed my perception. It's quite provocative, but for me as a man, it was pretty fundamental.
Thank you, Richard. And last but not least, Nicola.
I'm just fascinated by Richard's aha moment. I'm Nicola Staunton. I'm a relationship manager and MD at Wellington Management. I've spent all my career, I guess, in institutional asset management sales. I now look after the LGPS business at Wellington. I am passionate about getting involved in this subject because really I've benefited so much from having male allies over the years, even though they didn't have a name back then, 20 years ago. But, I had advocates and I had allies operating in the background. And so I feel obliged that I, as a senior woman, participate in supporting my colleagues, but also encouraging men to do the same. So really excited to be involved.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to say to the participants, as I'm going into the questions, please forgive me because I will be playing with my screen, so you'll get a very lovely view of my index finger. Anyway, so thank you so much, panelists. That was a great introduction to all of you. I'm delighted to have worked with all of you at some point, so I do know you better than most chairs do, so I will be delving a little bit deeper into some of the insights that you shared with me before. My first question is to all of you. Can you please explain why male allies are important in creating gender equality? And a linked question that's come through from one of our audience is, what should men do more in order to get the best out of the female colleagues they have in their teams? So if I could ask you to volunteer, because I don't want to, if you've got something to say, please put your hand up and say it. I'm not going to go around the entire panel for every question we have. So who'd like to go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think you mentioned it in your introduction that this isn't a female issue. This is a broader issue than that. And actually, we're trying to break down societal norms that have been in place for centuries and centuries. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, is it's not a female issue, it's all of our issue. And if we want better outcomes, if we want fairer society, then that's why we need male allies. We need everyone supporting this. And I can see that Richard's going to jump in, so I won't hold the stage.
Yeah, Richard, thank you, Jackie. Richard, your hand is raised.
So I think about, I guess my realization, right, was it's not, I couldn't work out why this problem existed 2 years ago, because I've never consciously chosen to pay a woman less or not promote a woman or been in any way sexist, I don't believe, right? And I look around my office and I think most guys are the same, right? So I couldn't work out why the problem persisted. And what struck me in this aha moment I referred to earlier was it's not enough not to be a bad guy, because actually most people are not bad guys, right? You've got to step forward and do more than that if you want to make a difference. And you can look at corporate culture and say it has to change or it will change or whatever, but actually that exists in individual pockets in a business between leaders and managers and teams, and every male or female can play their own part in solving it. And I think if you solve it from that level upwards, the culture will change, as well as solving it top down. So I'm much more interested not in top-down cultural change, because I can't truly affect a lot of that personally, but in what I can do for males and females working in my team. And we'll talk about that later on, Janine, but that's why I think, you know, allyship starts at management level, not at a sort of corporate, invisible level.
And Richard, on that point, as I say, because we've had a question from one of our audience, I would like to pick you up on what men can do to get the best out of the women in their team. So can you make sure we come back to that?
Sure.
Nicola, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and I was just going to sort of pick up on Richard as well, and maybe it's getting a little bit into that next question, Janine. What can we do? I think we actually need to have more allies, and it'd be very interesting to see sort of the seniority or the experience of some of the people on the call. I think senior leaders, quite rightly, are very important in setting the tone from the top. However, I think, you know, a lot of the work actually gets done in organizations at middle management and junior management level. You know, that messy middle work gets done. The majority of reviews that happen, the majority of projects that get assigned, the majority of promotions that get decided, whether behind closed doors or in a more transparent way. And I think middle managers and let's call it next gen allies need to be created within organizations. So it's not just the very well-meaning top-level management, but it trickles down. People are sort of tapped on the shoulder and said, you know, you could really make a fascinating and really important impact if you get involved. And so it's, you know, as Richard said, it's not just top-down, it's the bottom-up, and the bottom-up all through the organization.
And that's a really important point. It's how do we grow that next gen, Nicola? And I know that you've got some practical examples that we'll come on to in a bit. But if I can maybe ask the three wonderful women on the panel who have had incredible careers. So you are, I would say, reached very senior levels within your organizations, most of which you've achieved on your own, clearly. But can you maybe give us a few examples of where male allyship has helped in your career progression for the benefit of the women who've joined us this morning? Who's going to go first? Tanya.
Hi, Janine. Yeah, absolutely, I would. And you're right, a long career. I was thinking about this yesterday, and I've had 8 managers in my life, managers, leaders, all of whom have been male. And I can quite comfortably say that 4 of them have been excellent and real allies to me, and 4 of them have been quite the reverse. And I think, you know, like perhaps a lot of women, you know, a couple of decades ago, starting your career, you perhaps thought all you had to do as a woman to succeed was to do the right things, you know, to be well qualified, to be really good at your job, really conscientious. and success would follow. And I think I must have been very naive back then, because quite quickly it became obvious that was not the game in town. At certain employers, it was about being one of the boys. It was about who you knew. And I think that in my early career, there was definitely a perception that women weren't leadership material. It was all going to be about, you'd be all right doing the job, but, don't actually try and better yourself, because we see you at this level and nowhere else. And aren't you lucky to be, one of the sales team anyway? And so, with a degree of naivety, I think I set off in the workplace back then. But I have had leaders who have, as I think it was Nicola was saying, tapped me on the shoulder and said, you've got more to offer here, and I will, make a case for you. I will help you and support you and encourage you. And sometimes when you've been knocked back a little bit, you need that extra encouragement from somebody saying, I believe you can do this. There's nothing stopping you. I'll talk to so-and-so about this. I'll advocate a little bit for you as well and bring you into the right conversations. And I've definitely experienced that, and not least at Vanguard, that's been absolutely pivotal to my career here. So it really matters, I think, when men see that women perhaps are capable and that they need some encouragement, and they feel confident enough to advocate a little bit for them, and to just to help them to be a voice in the workplace as well.
So Tanya, for you, it's really about the small things, the small gestures, the small
absolutely
actions.
Yes.
Okay, great.
It really is, yeah. Sometimes it is just that little bit of extra encouragement, because I think a lot of women, who want to get on are quite strong generally, but we can be undermined and have confidence taken away. And I think men that can help us to do better are welcome.
Thank you. Jackie or Nicola?
Yeah, similar story actually. Even this role that I'm doing now, I had to get a nudge from a very senior male to put my hand up for it. So I think those little examples of recognising talent and pushing forward, or just a bit of encouragement. And I think the other thing is that I have found helpful is male allies noticing compositions of meetings, committees, etc., and then possibly putting me or other senior females forward to be part of that. So I think that awareness from male allies and then stepping in and actually doing something about it is definitely one of the things that I've noticed in my career that's really helped.
And Jackie, I know that you have a wonderful story about effectively sitting in a meeting and commenting on the fact that you were the only female there, and some of your colleagues having an aha moment. Can you maybe share that with us as well?
Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things about having male allyship and being asked to get onto steering committees, etc., is then sometimes you might be the only one. So I did go to a meeting with a supplier. I was asked to join the steering committee, and I joined, and it was just a Zoom screen full of men. And so I made a joke about it and said, oh my gosh, am I the only female in this group? And you could see everyone looking around just thinking, oh, yeah, yes, you are. But there's probably about 15 of us in the meeting. I couldn't believe that no one had noticed that before when it seemed so obvious. But again, another example of when male allies really stand up, they would have noticed that. They would have realised there wasn't diversity in the room. And that is one of overcoming it when you are a minority in the room, is I use a little bit of humour to try and draw attention to it rather than feeling like I'm being aggressive about it or assertive.
Thank you. Nicola?
Yeah, I guess Tanya and Jackie are also talking about sponsorship, and I think sponsorship is one of the really tangible actions that a male ally can take. And a male ally is, they champion you, they have your back, whether it's behind closed doors or in more public scenarios like a team meeting or a town hall kind of meeting. But I guess what I received from two very specific, they were informal sponsors, but nonetheless very effective, was that that sponsorship, but what they brought for me was transparency, and they shone a light very clearly on what needed to be done to transition to the next stage. And I don't know if I would have figured that out. Now, this of course isn't unique to women, but it may be symptomatic that a woman may not ask as readily as man. I don't know, but I think it's important in all walks of life that transparency is encouraged. And in the case of my sponsors, it was about, you know, how does promotion work around here? How do you move to the next step? Who makes the decision? When is that decision made in the calendar? And what are the criteria that the decision-making parties are looking for? That transparency is so invaluable for a woman or for a man. And I think if, you know, we're talking about actionable steps here, if you as somebody that has gone through a particular step in your career can share that experience with some female talent, not in a mansplaining kind of way, but in a, hey, would it be interesting to hear my experience? I've just gone through this kind of way. I think that's really invaluable, and it was certainly good for me.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Nicola. We have had somebody say, could you please maybe move your mic a little bit further away from your face? So if you could do that, that'd be fantastic as well. Richard, you had your hand up, and in fact, I was going to come to you next, but please make your contribution and then I'll ask you a question that I was going to ask you, but somebody from the audience has also asked.
I was building on Jackie's point, which I think, to be a male ally, right, it's just vital we call this stuff out. So if you're in a meeting room as a male, and there's no females in the room, or they're fundamentally under involved, right, you've just got to call it out. And it might not fix that particular meeting, but it raises awareness of the problem. Yeah, a similar example of that is we have a lot of internal conferences, and so often you've got 8 men speaking out in 8 slots. It's just not acceptable. And it's not acceptable because it demonstrates to some of our exceptional female talent that the senior positions are filled by males. And it's not about, you know, ticking a box about diversity in a panel or a conference. It's about role modeling. And so I think it's incumbent on everyone in this call, male or female, to call out a lack of diversity in meetings or in conferences. And it's not difficult to do and doesn't tend to get badly received. Everyone goes, oh yeah, I hadn't seen that. So,
and Tanya, I'll come back to you in a minute, if I may. I was just going to ask a question which one of our audiences asked, which was also going to be a follow-on question for me, and that is to both Richard and John. I know that you've both spoken about how difficult it is sometimes to become a male ally, because sometimes men are worried about what they say around D&I and saying the wrong things in particular. What's prompted you? What's made you become a male ally, and how have you eased into that role without putting your foot in it?
So I first started doing something probably 12 or 13 years ago. Every time you get all the private bankers in a private bank together, these sort of all banker meetings, you look around and it's 90% men and 90% white men. So I felt uncomfortable about that at the time. And you look at the whole, you look at the rest of the firm, and the mix is, the mix is far more even. So I was thinking, what is it about this particular role that, either women aren't getting into it, women aren't interested in that role. And that was sort of one point where I then sort of started mentoring a few people, thinking, that was, well, it was the only thing I could sort of think to do. But the real sort of aha moment for me was when I worked at Barclays before Julius Baer, and they went on a huge hiring spree of private bankers, but private bankers with no experience. So they brought people in from completely different industries and then put them through sort of a 6-month boot camp to learn the job. And to Barclays' credit, it was almost exactly half women, half men from all walks of life: lawyers, accountants, nurses, teachers, entrepreneurs. They brought in all these really amazing people, really high quality people they got onto this program. 3 years later, almost all of the women had left and almost all of the men were still there. And, and the women weren't, it wasn't that the men had been successful in the role and the women hadn't. And that's why you ended up with that skew. the women almost all exited. They all left, and with a lot of them, you know, having the numbers coming through, being really successful. And I mentored two of those women who were sort of on that program, and then spoke to a number of them when they left. And they said it was the culture. The culture was sort of too male. It was too, too testosterone-y, too aggressive. And I had absolutely no awareness of that. I thought the culture was fine. That was such a shock to me. I thought it was more about opportunity. I thought it was about the bias at the time that people just wanted to hire men as private bankers or promote the sort of the juniors into that role. So sort of women getting into that role and then really experiencing the role and being successful in that role and not liking it was a moment where I then realized there's something more, there's something obviously broader and bigger and more to it. And that's when you start to realize that it's the culture, that the culture has been male dominated for decades. So sort of everything about it, we talked a little bit about, about meetings, about panels, about speakers, sort of every element of it has this bias built in. And it's a bias towards things that, that are more naturally male traits or things that we sort of do more, the more sort of assertive behavior, the more confident behavior, the believing that you're excellent at your, every man in the job thinking he's amazing at the job and should get promoted.
And I know, John, as a self-confessed introvert, you struggle with that self-promotion as well. So it isn't just a female trait, is it? No,
and that's, I've the solution for me to sort of get on in this role, which is generally, sort of suits extroverts better, or the culture is certainly sort of more extrovert, is I've turned myself into, I'm an extrovert at work and an introvert at home.
Yeah, brilliant.
So I can appreciate that, very, very often, women are having to shoehorn themselves into the behaviors and I suppose, where there've been mentors there, say, look, you're going to have to behave more like this to get on. But of course, that's just not right. People should be able to be themselves and do their job to a very high standard and be rewarded for that, rather than having to behave completely differently to what's normal and comfortable for them.
Yeah, indeed. And we've got quite a lot of questions, by the way, and a couple of really lovely comments. One about you, Jackie, and your leadership style, which is wonderful. But, just picking up on a couple of points you made there, John. And I know, Richard, we've got you to come to, and Tanya, I can see your hand up as well. Just around the biases, Richard, I just wonder whether you can talk a little bit about how to break some of those biases. And how you've effectively tackled that in your role as a male ally, accidental male ally, as you call yourself.
It's not accidental; it's just late to the party, Janine. Okay. I think to the earlier question, though, right? I find speaking out quite uncomfortable because I'm quite worried about saying the wrong thing. And you just got to. That's whether it's gender bias, racial bias. I think speaking out is so important. But for me, I found that quite difficult. And in fact, I'm quite nervous about this conversation because it's new to me, right? So I think it's just recognizing that discomfort exists. And what I've found from talking to people about the subject is it's better to speak out with the right intention and passion, and perhaps say just slightly the wrong thing once, not twice, than it is to be silent on the matter, right? But I think that discomfort is real. In terms of what I think we can do, it's the biases, exactly how John explained it brilliantly. I thought it was a really eloquent explanation of culture and what we're up against here. I found simple things can make a real difference. So I'll give you an example in our business, which I think is very, very focused culturally on the issue. But in the meeting we had recently, we discussed this issue, why this inequality pervades and still exists. And 5 men all spoke on the subject off the hip effectively. And then we moved on. And not a single female spoke about it. And it was comical. And I wouldn't have noticed. I'd have been speaking too, by the way, had it not been for me pausing before I spoke, because I'd learned something about it. And it's just that comic. So in that particular example, is recognizing that the meeting structure might suit the person who's willing to speak without thinking more. And the person might want to think before they speak often gets left behind in the conversation. And that then pervades. That then makes you think about how you view those people and their contribution to the business. which then affects promotion, progression, all the things that then come after that. It's that really subtle cultural meeting style, as an example, that has got such knock-on consequences for how anyone's perceived subsequently. So that's one example of where I think anybody can make a difference.
Sorry, Richard, you make a really important point there. So I suppose the point you're making isn't around, it's around, this isn't just about being selfless, but there is actually a driver, something that will lead to a benefit to the individuals who are putting themselves out there and trying to be encouraging more equity by through male allyship, right? So it's not just a selfless act.
I don't think it's selfless. I mean, I don't do it for a particularly selfish reason, but I don't think it's selfless. I mean, clearly, if you find the best talent, be they male or female, and they are given the chance to perform at the best possible role for them, that's brilliant for the business. It's brilliant for the manager, the leader. It promotes much more colleague harmony. It promotes much stronger team ethics, all of which are what I'm paid to try and drive. And this is one aspect of how we need to address that, I think. I don't do it though for some sort of corporate good. I just do it because it improves the environment in which people around me work and help them thrive. I think that's how I see it. But that bias can be broken down all over the place.
Well, I suspect if you've got any open roles in your team, there'll be loads of people applying for them. Tanya, you've had your hand up for ages, so let me come to you next.
I'm going to put it down before I forget as well. There we go. Thank you, Janine. And I had wanted to pick up on a couple of things that people said. So Richard, first, I completely agree with what you were saying about, you know, having not many women in rooms and being conscious of it. And I think, you know, what we've learned as a business at Vanguard is if you want to change that, you've got to model it. You've got to be really conscious about, you know, how you represent your business as well. So for other people looking in, you're not going to attract the best female talent if all they ever see is a bank of men of a similar background and age all talking at them on behalf of that company. So it's so important that when you have that public platform, you make sure it models the way that you want your company to be perceived, and be really conscious about it and start modelling that, and it will just become more and more natural as it goes. And the other point was around, you know, attracting women, and really interested in John's experience there at the bank, because I think, you know, I've found as a recruiting manager, it's actually been really quite difficult sometimes to attract women, especially into sales roles. It's perceived as being very male dominated. And when there are good women out there in the industry, often they're, you know, where they are in their work, they are comfortable because they've found an employer that makes them feel valued and makes them feel comfortable, and, you know, they are reluctant often to leave. So when I have recruited women, I've had to really sell the job quite hard to them, to say, look, you'll be okay over here, it will be fine. But it's still quite difficult, but the benefits are there, because when we recruit women, we generally find that they're really loyal once they're comfortable. But you have to create that culture, and that comes from surrounding them with people who will give them a platform, who will listen to them, who will support them, who will understand the differences in approach. Again, back to something I think it was Richard was saying there about you know, different styles. I would say that I am somebody who sits and waits for my turn to speak. You know, I'm not the first with my hand up every time. I haven't ever been that person. So there'll be periods in my career where people probably would have assumed I had nothing to say, but because everybody else jumps in so quickly, you don't get the chance. You're still forming your thoughts. You're still wanting to think about what it is you want to put across. So recognizing that and giving people that forum and that chance to be brought in, when perhaps everything around them is quite loud and shouty, I think is important. And again, somewhere that allies can really make small differences that do make a big difference to the individual.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tanya. We've had, I'm going to break my my sort of pattern of questions and just go a little bit off piste, if I may, panelists. We've had a number of questions from the audience around flexible working and what can be done through male allyship to change the view of flexible working. One particular comment around a lot of the men that this lady works with have wives at home who are caring for the children, are primary carers for the children, and have a slightly separate setup. So for her, it's been very difficult to take on board that flexible working. What tips or comments have the panelists got in order to help with the perception? Nicola, you've got your hand up straight away.
I guess back to my original comments about just transparency generally. I think if a man is going to is leaving work early, and maybe this is not necessarily flexible working, but just general working practices, which is next, I guess, adjacent to the question. If you are leaving work early and you're going to pick up the kids from school or from the childminder or whatever, just say, I'm off, I'm going to pick up the kids. And when a man says that, it is a lot more powerful than when a woman does it. And, you know, you don't slink off and sort of try and make a secret of it, but just make it, you know, this is acceptable behavior. This is normal behavior. And I think women will be more inclined to work flexibly and to feel like they won't be criticized for it. So I just think transparency around what males are doing as well within that flexible arrangement just again lifts the veil from these practices.
Yeah. And have any of you got any examples of senior men who have taken time off for caring responsibilities at all? I mean, are there any tangible examples that you can share with us? Jackie?
I thought John was going to speak
then.
Yeah, we implemented equality from a parental leave perspective. Well, I lose track of time with COVID, but I think pre-COVID, and ensuring that we share those stories. Sometimes we have to proactively search them out and publicise, and we use Yammer. I'm sure other people use different types of internal channels. But really, someone mentioned it before, that role model word, getting people to talk about the difference that it made for them has been really important. And we have absolutely sought out senior people that have done that, because there's absolutely still the view that the more senior you get, you don't take advantage of these things. So director levels, etc., we've absolutely showcased that. So if you are male and you've done anything, I encourage you to share your stories and make it more accessible for all.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Jackie. And John?
Well, I'm one of the examples you're looking for there. I had a little boy 21 months ago, and Julius Baer had relatively recently introduced lengthy parental leave. So I took my full 3 months. I think I was the second person to do it. One of our portfolio managers was the first, and a lot of people were very surprised that I took it. It was probably 50-50, the male reaction, I would say, between, you know, good for you, you know, what a great thing, you know, what a great thing for you to do, and all the positivity around that, and the other half, in sort of various sort of different ways, were really surprised that I took it. I guess it's very new in the company. Maybe they've already had their kids, so they're jealous that they didn't get it. But it was an amazing thing for me to have that 3 months and to take it, and I was incredibly well supported by company as a whole and my team, and I found it very easy to take it and to make it work.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm mindful of the time. Now, who would have thought that we would run out of time? Richard, you've got your hand up, so let me go to you. And I also want to finish off just very quickly with a few closing comments. So, Richard, did you want to have your...
Yeah, just one observation. I was going to say, I hated my 2 weeks of maternity leave that I had when the kids were born. It was so hard. I couldn't imagine taking 6 months off, but that's damning on me, frankly. I think one of the things I've learned about this, right, is that allyship has to start at home. And if I am awful at this, by the way. I'm a crap role model for that concept. My wife would laugh if she heard me on this conversation. But that again, shame on me, right? It's got to start at home. You've got to be able to, if both parties want to have a career as an example, and you've got to both take accountability for that. And that, and for the way your sons or daughters view males and females in the workplace. And that for me is another learning that's really suppose, shocked and challenged me. It sounds obvious, but to me it wasn't that obvious until I thought about it a bit more. I'll leave it at that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. Well, just in terms of, just quickly, I think it's fair to say that we only have 45 minutes and the 45 minutes have flown by. We still have engagement with the audience with loads of questions coming through. So thank you to all of you who've joined us this morning. It's been a wonderful discussion. I always knew we'd have a problem keeping to time with this wonderful panel. And I've really enjoyed chatting to all of you. Thank you for the tips. Hopefully all of you will go away with something that you can share either with your colleagues or your organizations. And then, as I said, the toolkit will be circulated round. And we look forward to continuing the discussion on this really important matter. Thank you. And thank you to my panelists. You were just wonderful. Thank you.